Effluvium. The time is now 7:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, April 18th, 2023. And I have two folks backstage who will be joining us shortly. The first is a gentleman with a small yet growing YouTube channel, somebody to watch. I would say he is on my top 10 list of YouTubers that you should check out. In fact, his name is Sebastian Furtado, and he'll be joining us in the discussion for this episode as we go over nuance in fragrance. So this is going to be more of sort of an exploration on the ontological reality of fragrance as a concept, as a function, and the expectations that we might impose on it. What do we want a fragrance to do to us or do for us? We want it to perform, but what about sitting with it and letting it just be? So we're going to be discussing some fragrances that we feel demonstrate some of the more nuanced aspects of fragrances that we may take for granted when we're thinking about its function. Emily will be joining us in that discussion as well. She is our second panelist, Emily of Shelter and Perfume, an independent perfumer. And three of her creations are going to be first impressions. And I'll be starting off this stream exploring them and experiencing them, at least the top notes, as it'll be first impressions. So let's get things started. I already did try two of Emily's creations, for which I found quite pleasant, if not really enjoyable, actually. There's actually one, her most recent release, it is actually a collaboration. It's called The Tower. And this is a collaboration that she is doing with a content creator. And he goes by the Fragtastic Mr. Fox, Chris Fox. And according to her site, the tower is inspired by the beauty that can come from sacred destruction, solace, and silence. The only way out of heartbreak is through it. There are no shortcuts to change or healing. And what I found this to be is a really compelling, almost like an old wood accord in it. It's very peppery. It's very dry. There is a smokiness, but not a campfire smokiness, not your typical idea of a smoky woods. But that's sort of the subtlety, going back to nuance. It's a nuanced smoke. And there's some molybdenum in it as well. Somewhat vanillic. And it has a very strong woody dry down. I can still actually smell a little bit of it after having taken a shower, which is not a bad thing. It isn't screechy by any means. It's actually, it's very cedar-like. It's just very peppery, prickly kind of cedar. It kind of reminds me of like a cedar chest in its dry down. And the other one that we have here is Heart Spark. I tried this other one earlier. And this is a scent of a million moments. And what's interesting about this is when I tried it, and I'm not sure how many people who are tuned in are familiar with this fragrance, the original iteration of Parfum d'Ette from Kenzo. Her Heart Spark actually and this is a fragrance that I really like. It's a very watery, spring floral, lily of the valley forward. Now, there is the notes breakdown, and then there's also perception. So I do pick up watermelon, but there's an adjacency with watermelon and melon kind of notes, watery notes like cucumber and lily of the valley. And there's a certain point in the development that's sort of this sweetened, tart kind of lily of the valley that I found really intriguing with this Fir Balsam Absolute. Really, really intriguing stuff. It reminds me of like some of the best, 90s fragrances that I can think of that were experimenting with watery accords. So that one was quite enjoyable as well. So I already tried those two earlier, and they were an enjoyable experience to wear. The 3 that I'm going to be doing, I'm not going to be wearing live, but I'll be using a test strip for, and we'll get started with those. But before I do, I want to check in with the chat. And just give me a moment here. And hello, Dusan. And greetings to you. What is Victoria's Secret? Hi, thank you for tuning in. And hi, Margie. Great to see you. Hey, Duncan. Good to see you, GMG. And Micah. Joshua, spend some time. Great to see you. And Darren, my friend, wonderful to see you too. And Philippe. Philippe's scent of the day is Cartier Eau de Dieu. And Danny, good to see you. Hello, scent of the day, Vetiver Gris by Jacques Fat. And we have a super chat from Dusan. Greetings from Rachel. She has a class now. Yes, Rachel could not meet us. She is actually attending a class, but she will be here in spirit. And it will be the 3 of us for this episode. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to start with the first impressions, the 3 first impressions from Shelter in Perfume. And just a reminder to folks that in addition to the options of Super Chat or Super Sticker, you can also buy me a coffee, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Each one is $5. Your support helps grow this channel. Visit www.buymeacoffee.com/Joseph Kolb P. So I'll leave that up while we get started with the 3 first impressions. I'm going to start off with L. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on this one. And on the sample, it says L, and it's subtitled, I believe, because it's in sort of more of a faded font. I love the L, actually, the font of the L, the script. L is for love. And this is a heart-healing scent. According to the site, originally created for Emily's dear friend Lejla or Lela, I can't pronounce that name properly, who isn't at home where she is, but can't go back to her home country. Ella's warmth and sweetness, like carefree optimism, rebirth, renewal, like yards and yards of soft yellow chiffon floating in the sunny spring breeze. Elle has a delicate softness, yet is ridiculously long-lasting. All right. I'll press a little bit more. There we go. I'm going to have a very fragrant microphone. Ooh. Now, immediately greeted with white musk. Immediately greeted with, and I'm not going to pretend to be able to parse out the various white musks used, but it is a white musk. It's very comforting. It kind of reminds me of the Grossman Accord, the Hug Me Accord in that respect. There's something, and whether or not it actually exists here, it has that same kind of textural effect as methyl ionones, like violet ionones. There are also these lactones, like peachy, pear skin, like stone fruits. Ooh, and the pear is really starting to come forward. It's kind of like a Williams pear, like very like when you smell a Williams pear, the flesh and the skin, it's almost kind of like wine-like. And it also kind of reminds me of a liqueur that's called Belle de Bouillet, which I believe actually uses Williams pear. I'm really impressed with the pear note in this. Now, the pear is more forward than any of the other fruits here, but there is sort of a melange of fruit here. But the pear is very forward, which is no easy feat, actually, in creating a good pear accord. And it does feel like optimism. It does feel like promise. It does evoke springtime, springtime regrowth, rebirth. And there is this lily as well, kind of like a creamy white floral, not indolic though, very pure, very clean. So far that's quite delightful on paper. It'd be interesting to sample that on skin. Next, what I'm going to try is Le Bonbon d'Emily. Le Bonbon d'Emily. An ethereal gourmand. Now that's intriguing. That's a concept that that gets my attention. All right. Ooh, it's on me too. That's fine though. Wow. Ooh. I can taste it, but I don't recommend tasting it. It smells really nice so far. Now, immediately I have orange. So what's interesting with all of these is there is this legibility to a lot of the notes. They come to the fore, and then they kind of step back and allow somebody to take the lead for a while. And that orange is getting creamier. And there is sort of like this guaiacol kind of thing going on, like a smoky vanilla, like a smoky caramelic vanilla. Nutty too. So people who know me know that I'm rather persnickety when it comes to gourmands. But what I can appreciate about this gourmand is that the perfumer, I can tell, is not leaning on ethyl maltol or heavy doses of vanilla as a crutch, which makes it a bit more balanced and tempered. There's a sort of an almond. It's very almondy, hazelnut maybe, some nutty like pyrazines. And if you want to know what mumbo jumbo I'm saying, just ask and I'll explain. Pyrazines, like there's a lot of pyrazines that build nut accords, nutty pyrazines. There's, they're very strong, high impact materials. Very little are used in a nutty accord. But I can detect them and their role in this, which isn't to say that isn't a sign of a flaw by any means. It's just my familiarity with the materials in isolation. Well done. Well done. And I say that as somebody who is temperamental when it comes to gourmands. That is one that I, so far with that first impression, am pleased with the cohesiveness and sort of the ability for these different elements to breathe in it, which is pretty impressive for an independent perfumer. So well done. Third, and this is the one that I most anticipate from reading it, because I think it is most of my wheelhouse. This is called In the Vineyard. And it is described as an uplifting, green, floral wood scent. And folks out there, you know my yen for verdancy in all different forms. So I am excited to give this a test run on paper with a first impression. I immediately am reminded of freesias, like that peppery, linalool, heavy kind of. And I get this from Olfesia, from Diptyque as well. It's clean, it's almost laundry-like, but it somehow emanates from a flower. Freesias have these very ethereal, sheer kind of headspace to them. And like I said, it's kind of peppery, but it's also green. And there's a high linalool content, kind of reminds me a little bit of like coriander. And that's what I noticed first. Now I'm starting to pick up orris root. And a violet. And there is this tartness. There's this sort of pucker. Rhubarb or grapefruit. I just need to gather some stuff together here. Green and musky. It kind of smells like something that Comme des Garçons would release, because it's very, very bold in its greenness, and it's very musky. I kind of love it. It's really fearless in its execution, because it is a courageous feat to do a very forward green scent without so much restraint as to kind of mute it. And this is not muted. Oh, there is a lot of orris. There's like it's a really orrisy. It's like, I would explain it as an orrisy freesia with musk. It reminds me a lot of a freesia by Diptyque, if that was more pronounced, if it had more chutzpah, as it were. And there's kind of another thing that feels kind of like ivy leaves as well. I don't know if that was an intention, but so an ivy accord, some might argue that it's a fantasy accord, but ivy leaves, especially if you do crush them, have a distinct pungent green scent to them, a very fresh, bracing, pungent green scent. Very nice. That could be, out of the three that I just sampled, or maybe out of all of them, my favorite one, In the Vineyard. Lovely. Okay. And back to the chat, and then soon we are going to start the discussion with our panelists. Okay, and I am catching up here. Hello, Western Oud. Scent of the day, ADP Colonia. Wonderful. And what is Victoria's Secret is Wearing the Tower. Wonderful black spruce notes that crackled into dry woods and soft orris. I find it changes on each wearing interestingly, and I love the concept as well. And hello, J.O. Fragrance Matt had some connection, some internet issues. He is A-OK, and I'm sure he does appreciate your asking. Nisi PC or Nisi Pichi, hello, scent of the day 4160, Tuesdays, New York, 1955. Josh's scent of the day, Vierge Toreros by Etat Libre d'Orange. Hey, Alex. Alex's scent of the day is Versace Blue Jeans. And Darren Allen says pear accords are tricky because by its very nature, pear is sort of a nondescript fruit aroma. Good point. And Josh says pear notes seem to come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. Indeed, much like apple or a lot of other fruits. You know, you have that sort of standard generic fruit flavor that we come to associate, you know, with candies. But when we're talking about that fruit, you have so many different varieties, and they're going to give off many different facets that differ from one variety to another. You know, some are going to be more tart, others are going to be more sweet, some are going to smell more ripe or more green, crisp, or sugary. Hi, Fernando. Good to see you. And I think you may be referring to Bonbon d'Amélie, which I failed to get the notes breakdown on. I could totally see that. I was kind of thinking maybe something like a praline. Would be very helpful if you could type the names in chat or highlight them on the screen as a banner. I try my best. It's kind of hard to do that. Usually I have a sort of a partner in crime to help me with that. But once I get caught up in the chat, I will type in all three that I sampled, and then we'll get things started. And Nisi Peachy says, I realized recently I'm not even sure what musk smells like. Best musk to me, Coty's Wild Musk Oil in the 1970s. I hate Kiehl's, but like Reminiscence, Paris, and Bruno Acampora. Hello, Perfumeros. Hello. Okay. All right. I'm going to put in the names of the three that I had sampled, and then we'll get started with the discussion, bring in our panelists. Okay. Here, my rickety keyboard from my 2017 MacBook Pro with those awful butterfly keyboard. Okay. All right. And I will double check to make sure I have those names correct. And I think that I do. All right, folks. These are the names of the fragrances that I had given my first impressions on. All right, we're going to get things started. First, we're going to bring in Sebastian, and everybody imagine that you're in a live audience and give a round of applause to Sebastian. Hello.
Hello. Hello, everybody in the chat.
Now, I wanted to recommend to everyone who was tuned in to check out your YouTube channel. Would you mind if I shared the link to your channel?
Oh, no, not at all. Please go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to share the channel with everyone in a link. And my goal is to get you to 1,000 subscribers. It looks like you're very close to that.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you, and thank you for the invitation. I follow you, as you know, and I love your content, and it's a big pleasure being here. We did a live before with Eugene.
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, it was a little while ago. Yeah, that was great. And I'm trying to remember exactly what video it was where I first discovered you. I'm actually kind of going back to your archive, and I believe it must have been in Hermes, because you and I are both huge fans of Hermes. Oh, I remember your Saracen video. I watched that. You inspired me to bite the bullet and purchase a bell jar of Saracen throughout video. You're guilty as charged. I think that the first video that I had watched was your Val de Nuit, the EDT, the one that you did a little over a year ago. I think that was the first one. So But thank you so much for accepting my invitation for this discussion. And like we had planned, we will be discussing nuance in fragrance. And I had asked for you to set a few things aside. But I also want to bring in Emily because I would love to have her join in the conversation. I see her waving from backstage because I'm sure she would have some valuable input as well for the conversation. Everyone, please welcome Emily of Shelter and Perfume.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I was clapping and waving for you, Sebastian. You couldn't see me, obviously, but this live studio audience here in Portland was like, hello.
Great to have you.
I am so glad to be here.
Yeah. I'm glad to have both of you on Effluvium. I've been looking forward to this particular one. So let's talk about nuance in perfume. Let's think about some aspects of perfume that really do require that we pay closer attention and maybe not concern ourselves so much with what it's doing to give us attention or how performative or loud or diffusive it is. I just think that this is a fascinating topic because a lot of people approach fragrance first and foremost as functional, like it serves a function. You know,
to
a lot
drop
of
panties.
To drop, perhaps, or to at least attract somebody for courtship or whatever else.
That's a very much more polite way of saying it than we mostly hear.
Courtship. But perfume can be experienced very differently. It can sort of evoke memory. It can set a mood. It doesn't need to be worn around other people. I think that the most diehard perfume enthusiasts will write reviews discussing how much they love a fragrance, and the times that they most love wearing that fragrance is maybe when they read a book.
Oh my God, yes. I just love that. You know what? Can I show you something really quick?
Of course.
As a man of the great outdoors, and because I've sent you pictures of things in my yard before and asked you, do you have any idea what the heck it is? It's on the east side of my house in Portland, Oregon. Do you know what these are?
Those look to be Korean spiced viburnum. Are they very fragrant?
They're very fragrant. They are, as far as I know, they are Daphne.
Oh, they're Daphne? Well, let's give you a close-up because now that I'm looking, there's like briars on it, and that is not on viburnum. Or is there?
They're not really briars. They don't get briary. They look like it on screen, but but they're not actually they're just they're just more buds.
I see. I was going to say that's what a peculiar plant because we so often associate briars or thorns on roses, one of the only flowering plants that we really associate that with. But Daphne those are quite fragrant as well.
Oh my God. This is the thing that, like February is the worst month, right? Like you're so over winter. It feels like it's never going to be spring. And then I start checking on my Daphne. I have 3. I'm very, very thankful to have a big, beautiful backyard that the previous owners did a lot of work on that I now get to enjoy. So these are my what I have to look forward to getting through the month of February into March and April. And I watch them and wait for them and then fill my house with them. I put them in my car. I put them everywhere because they are so, they're really, it's heady. I would call them like a tuberose. They're even sweeter, I think, in a way. Very, I would say, narcotic is really the word to describe Daphne. I tried to send some to Darren Allen, but they didn't survive the trip across the country. So they had no smell, if you can believe it, by the time they got there.
Well, that's the thing about certain flowers is that some flowers, when you pick them, they grow stronger in scent, like hyacinths. And then others, as soon as you pick them, they immediately start to lose their fragrance. So it's fascinating, the behavior of fragrance chemicals in flowers and how they can retain or not retain. And I know that Daphne as a flower has been featured in fragrance as sort of an accord, if you will. And I think that there's an old book, Louis Appel, and it's one of these old books of various perfume accords, and there is a Daphne accord in there. Also a Stephanienatus. I remember there was a Stephanienatus, and Stephanienatus is also a beautifully scented flower. Yeah. Gorgeous stuff. I actually have not smelled Daphne flowers in a very long time. When I first saw them, I was like, those must be Korean spice viburnum. And the reason for that is because they're currently in bloom right now where I am.
Oh, okay. So you recognize.
So Korean spice viburnum have a very similar color to them, a very pale pink, similar, the 4 petals, but they grow more sort of in sort of like a corm, like they have like several flowers to like a globe.
Oh, sure.
And they smell sort of like a cross between a lilac and something a little bit more powdery and spicy. Very beautiful flowers. Yeah,
that sounds wonderful.
There's nothing blossoming where I am. It was actually snowing today, if you believe it or not.
Snowing. So yes, you're in Alberta. So
yes,
spring can be a tough season. You don't really get the spring nearly as much as even we do here in the Northeast.
Spring for us is literally just waiting for the snow to melt. That's our spring.
So not even snowdrops or crocuses or anything of the sort yet.
Nothing. I don't like the ground. The river just broke yesterday, actually. So
oh my.
Yeah. So it's the ground is still slightly frozen. I guess I'm trying to look out the window, but there's nothing. The snow is just gone. But today we had a little bit of snow, but it's already gone too. So hopefully this is the last snow for this spring.
Oh, I sure hope so, because I would love you to experience a nice springtime that doesn't rush too quickly into summer, which is known to happen. Sebastian, I wanted to ask if you could share one of the selections that you would set aside to demonstrate nuance and fragrance, and just tell us a little bit about it, if you don't mind.
I actually I have a bunch here, actually, but we're gonna go through. But one of them is Ilio from Diptyque.
This is one I haven't sampled. Tell us about it.
It's supposed to be like a cactus, desert cactus, as you can see in the illustration on the bowl and in the back as well. And it's they really do a good job when it comes to doing how to say this. Diptyque does a great job in terms of finalizing a product on top of an idea. And Ilio, it's I shouldn't put this on the skin. I'm just going to put this on a tissue. It's very light. It's very breezy, but it has a dewy kind of green aspect to it, and it's slightly floral too. But it's a very delicate kind of floral. It's there isn't a lot to it, and this is one of the things that I love about this perfume, because it's just a simple idea, a simple project, and it works. Sometimes we don't need a whole lot. Sometimes we just want something that's simple, and it delivers what it intends to, and it just works.
And that speaks to the ability of a fragrance to be intended for times of introspection and reflection. So at most, when we're sharing a fragrance like that, it is someone who is in tune to that that space, that headspace that we're in, that we're not looking to be gregarious. So more the intimacy that we have with someone, where you're having a conversation and you lean in and that's how you experience the fragrance. That it becomes like much more, almost more of a meaningful experience in a way, because you remember that intimacy. The intimacy ends up being tied to not only your time with that person, but also you remember that fragrance and how it took that intimacy to experience it. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I would love to try that one. Oh yes, go ahead,
Yeah,
Sebastian.
this is actually one of those introspective scents. It's a good way to put it, because it's not something that you put on if you want a lot of people to notice you, unless you put on a lot, because then you will become noticed. But in a very subtle, because it's a very subtle perfume, and I find that subtle perfumes have that kind of introspect aura to them, and but me being me, um, I find that any perfume can be introspective depending on your state of mind at the time when you're wearing it, or when you, or before even wearing it. Like lately, I've been in the mood, like I mentioned to you before, that I haven't been in the mood of wearing perfumes every single day, which is something that's not common to me.
Mhm.
But the days that I did feel like wearing perfume, I wore them at home after work, because I have very long working days. I work 12 hours each day, but by the time I leave my house and come back to my house, it's an average of 14 hours each day. So it's very long days. And I used to work 14 days in a row and have 2 weeks off, but now that it changed, hopefully I'll have more time for more things. And I always found myself in the introspective state of mind, feeling that way. So yeah, but I wear perfume to myself, so it's something that hasn't changed at all. I never wore perfume to call attention or to gather compliments or try to impress somebody, because I find that we should wear the perfume, not the other way around. But the perfume should wear us. So that's how I feel.
Emily, do you feel like something might be lost at times when we put too much emphasis on performance in a perfume, or whether or not it lasts for X amount of hours? Do you think so, especially depending upon certain accords or certain notes in a fragrance?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us.
I constantly think about this. Obviously, we want our fragrances to last, right? And I totally get that. Some things are not meant to last. You know, some notes just are fleeting, and that's how it is. But they certainly do grab our attention, we could say. But as for longevity, like, and things like that, yes, for some people that's very, very important. But I think it misses the potential that to focus solely or almost solely on longevity, projection, compliments. Even I think it kind of misses an opportunity for exactly as you're saying, introspection. What does this fragrance tell me about myself? What does this fragrance tell me about a perfumer? Am I questioning something? What do and even things like, what do I see in my mind? You know, we love to think about fragrances being transportive. And actually, I learned something so interesting in an Institute of Art and Olfaction class last fall that I took on fragrance and death rituals around, different throughout history and across the globe. And the instructor talked about how scent is our only sense stored in the limbic system in our brains. So that being the, as we commonly know it, the reptilian brain. And so when we smell something that smells like, my auntie's house, or my best friend, the pipe tobacco my best friend's dad used to smoke when I was a kid, or whatever. We are not just simply imagining that in our minds. We are physically re-experiencing it, which is fascinating to me. that that's fragrances can have that kind of power. And what if we could just sort of live in there a little bit without thinking so much about performance, or, you know, just really, what does this feel like? Where do I go in my mind? Is that kind of...
Oh, no. I know what you mean by this. And this is one of the most fascinating things about fragrance is its capacity to fire some neurons in the brain that may have not have been fired in a very long time.
I love that.
You might perceive something that you just can't help but to feel that you've smelt it one time before, but you're not sure when or how long ago. They do believe that you can recognize a scent that you had smelled 30 or more years ago after not having smelled it.
True. And even it's the first sense that really develops, right? Like infants can recognize their mother's scent by the time they're 2 weeks old, by the time they've been, and it's the last sense that goes before we die. Yeah.
It is the most primeval sense.
Yes.
It is actually one of the first senses for perception. You know, the earliest beings, the earliest animals developed receptors that would come to be what we know as olfactory receptors to observe without vision, because the earliest beings had nothing but this to count on, but to be able to perceive rather their environment. Yes. So this is there's just this ancient link that we have as you know, animals that are capable of this, that goes back millions of years. It's incredible stuff. And also, you know, out of the five senses, we as humans are most dismissive of scent as well.
Exactly.
Yes.
I don't remember last time I talked about this, but it is one of the most important actually senses, and it's it's taken for granted all the time, because even when people ask questions, if you had to lose a sense, what would you lose? Would you lose sight, hearing? Would you be mute? And nobody ever talks about the sense, which is a very interesting, because it's a safety mechanism. You know, how do you know there's a fire without seeing a fire? The smell of smoke. You know, the smell of smoke, it's something that you know there's a fire somewhere simply by the smell. You know, if you smell rotten milk, you can smell it before you put it in your mouth, and it's something that most of people take for granted, and it's literally a safety mechanism. We see dogs smell everything. If they smell something that we don't think it's you know, it's safe for them to eat or drink, they simply be rejected simply by smelling it, and it's a very rented sense that it's sad. A lot of people don't realize how important it is, and yeah, it's just sad. And it is the most primate of senses. Even in our brain, it's stored. I don't know exactly where it's stored, but it's stored in the part of the brain that was first developed. So that's how ancient it is.
There's a nice comment here from House of Darling Perfumer. I think of perfume performances as friends. They are here for a moment, a reason, or a season. I love fleeting encounters as well as longer stays. Yes. Yeah. I think the most unfortunate aspect might be how we impart quality and value in a fragrance based on these factors, and what we end up missing out on what could turn out to be really profound experiences. And that's understandable, especially if we may be on sort of a budget and we may not want to buy a full bottle of a fragrance that is $200 or more when we feel like it doesn't deliver lasting results to us. But that being said, if you at least sample it and spend time with it, to pass judgment, and take other people's reviews or opinions with a grain of salt, you may actually find that you're making a great investment, because the fragrance has this profound impact on you, even with its, not so great performance, whatever parameters that we use to measure that. I mean, that's an interesting concept. Like, how do we even measure that? What's the expectation that we really should have? I hear it differs. Like, some people think 5 hours, some people think 7 hours. I've heard people say that a fragrance isn't worth buying unless it lasts for 12 hours, which
you better love it then.
Because I really feel like it would wear out your welcome at that point. And truth be told, and you know this as somebody who studied perfume as well, Emily, in order to achieve that, you have to be so reliant on fixatives to give the illusion that it's still there. And that's no easy thing to do. And often when you put so much emphasis on that, it ends up really, really does wear its welcome, because you're just smelling fixatives. And yeah.
They become without, they can start to scream over everyone else, or just sort of loses character. And that's true. It just sort of like, I think, becomes kind of almost a nothing even, or just very generic and not interesting to wear anymore. And nor is it then nuanced as we're talking about, and all the many nuances of nuance, right?
Right.
So meta.
Sorry.
I think when you're talking about, to your point about what is the sort of people's expectations, and how we don't really think about sense of smell all that much, or and I think, as Sebastian was saying also, how many of us really wear perfume for ourselves, right? That I have, when I was young, I used to wear Kiehl's musk. And I loved it for myself, but men would tell me that I smelled like a man and they didn't like it. Well, I don't care. I'm wearing it anyway.
But you weren't wearing it for them to begin with. So
no, clearly, no, this is for me anyway. Yeah. So there are definitely things that we can wear for ourselves just because we like them. And then to your point about spending more time with them and thinking about them more than, and this is something that I'm sure that we could go on and on forever about, but thinking about perfume, not about what it smells like, but what it does for you in your mind. Because I have found in my experience that making a perfume that you want to smell a certain way is the best way to fail. Yeah. Making it to smell a certain way is, in my experience, is the wrong place, the worst place to start. It's the best place to finish. It's the worst place to start, because you're without a vision, without a plan, you end up in chaos.
Right. I just wanted to give a shout out to What is Victoria's Secret. Thank you so much for the super sticker. It's much appreciated. And there's a great comment that came through from GMG that I would like to share if I can relocate it. I couldn't care less about other people smelling me, as Alex, the Perfume Temple, said. I paid for the perfume, not them. But if the performance is so poor, I can't smell myself either, then that's a deal breaker to me, which can happen. It can happen. I think there's one thing where, there's one thing if you have that intimacy for yourself, but there can be flawed creations where
absolutely
they disappear even too soon for somebody who appreciates impermanence.
yeah, absolutely. There's such a I guess it just depends on what's most important to the person. I don't know how you measure something like that. I imagine the good people at L'Oreal are trying to measure that right now. I have no idea how you would, nor do I think I personally would want to.
I think it's impossible because it means something different to each person. For example, I don't care for how long the perfume lasts. Another example for that here, it's Cologne du Coq from Guerlain. It's a cologne. It's not. I know it's an eau de cologne. I know it's not meant to last perhaps more than an hour. I don't know. It doesn't last a lot. But colognes, eau de colognes, are that have that purpose to make you feel refreshed after a shower or if it's a hot day. That's my perception of that cologne. And I don't want it to last 4 hours, 5 hours, and it will never last, especially if it's a well-made cologne, because the notes themselves are very fleeting, and they're just can't. So it's just and I was speaking to someone that I know about this recently, and we were talking about a cologne from Hermes. I think it was oh my god, the amber one, amber doré, something like that. I can't remember.
Well, is it part of the cologne series? Isn't there a Mandarin play, or
there's a mandarin and there's an amber?
I think you're right. It's ambre doré, if I'm not mistaken.
Or the mandarin, something like that. So it was the amber one.
Yeah.
and then she was complaining that it doesn't last, so she would never buy it. I said, well, it's a cologne. Do you know what I mean? Like it's meant so much. It also reflects the price. They're not that expensive. I mean,
right.
Like my perception. I don't care a lot for how long it lasts, especially because I have a large collection. If something doesn't last a lot, I will just go, I'll overspray. I know if I know something doesn't have a profile, a scent profile that it's meant to last a long time, I just overspray and then it's fine.
Right.
And a lot of people say that it's very weak. Just put 2 extra sprays, 4 extra sprays. I don't know. And then there's also the fact that we become accustomed to scents, and eventually we don't smell them as we did in the beginning. So they might still behave the very same way. They would still last 8 hours as they did before, but because your brain is so accustomed, it doesn't perceive it as a danger or as threat. It just pushes to the side. And like, okay, so you might not smell yourself, but other people do. Like that happens to me all the time. I don't think I'm smelling something on myself, and then I hear a coworker say, "Oh my God, you smell so good today." What I'm wearing, I said, "Oh, you can still smell me," and it's also something that a lot of people don't tend to understand, that we become accustomed. Our brain becomes accustomed to the way we smell. Like we don't smell our house. We have no idea what a house smells like. But every time somebody comes into our house and say, "Oh my God, your house smells so good." So really, to me, like I don't smell anything. I said, "Well, yeah, but it does smell really good because we're so accustomed that we just don't perceive it anymore."
Better that than have somebody walk in and say, "Oh my God, your house smells so bad," which can happen as well. And this has to do with the brain adapting and learning that a message that is being transmitted is no longer important.
Mm-hmm.
It's how our brain functions. So when we think, "Oh goodness, I can't smell it anymore, it's not performing," it's because your brain is saying, I've adapted to this. I've acclimated. I don't need to receive the message the way that I was originally receiving it. I've moved on to other things.
This is not a threat.
No longer a threat, exactly. Going back to the most primal origins, we perceive whether something is safe or a threat. Once we get that, our brain decides we no longer need to process that information. Yeah. But we become so hung up with having, to hold on to it and wishing it for it to last and to linger and to just keep experiencing it for as long as possible. But this is the thing about processing this information. It just isn't meant to be processed that way. It inherently goes against the way our brain works. So if we were to be surrounded by scent aroma chemicals, which Emily, you and we'd be very familiar with this, and it can be really annoying because really strong aroma chemicals that are high impact, you do not want to smell them for a very long time.
No.
Right.
No. Some of them I open outside. I have to take outside to open because they're
And a lot of the perfume enthusiast frag heads, if you will, don't realize that if they were really given exactly what they wanted, they would be so put off after a while.
Oh my goodness, yes. Completely yes. And I wanted to I need to like start writing notes, because as you both are talking, I'm thinking of all these things. One I wanted to mention that I think is a big myth, misconception, something is about concentration, and how we have an impression that a parfum lasts longer than a cologne, and that may be true, but I'll tell you what, that praline accord that's in Bonbon, it is 7% concentration, and that is potent. Like I can smell it in my house for 3 days, at which I was like, okay, I need to do other things in here, but this is really this. I cannot have this last forever. But that's one of the things that depends on the material, right?
Yeah,
those lactones and all of the kind of nutty pyrazines and things that go into a nutty accord last, but you can only smell them at very, very high concentrations, or you wouldn't want to smell them. Or excuse me, a very
low, yeah. Right.
And you wouldn't want to smell them at a high concentration, or they smell like nothing. Which is a big thing that I had to learn long ago, when I would like just dump more of something, more C18 or something, and then why doesn't it smell like coconut? Because you dummy, you have to dilute it and use a lot less, and then it will smell like you want it to smell.
Right, because a lot of these materials have high molecular weight.
Yes.
So the higher the molecular weight, the harder it is for them to lodge into those receptors. So if it's undiluted, they get stuck. You don't really detect them. They get kind of stuck. That's why, like, a lot of people who are starting in perfumery, they're like, I don't get it. I don't smell it. Because you have to dilute it because of very high molecular weight materials. That's why people who are confused about sandalwood. Well, sandalwood, is it by its very nature, it needs to be shared out. There's this whole concept as well, and I know you already know this, but we're just talking to everyone else here, of shearing out something so that you because you're able to actually experience it the way it's supposed to be experienced. Now that's important for a perfumer, but now let's turn it around as a wearer. Because there are certain materials, and I think actually what is Victoria's Secret is a comment that kind of leans into this idea. It's also very dependent on materials. Considering the ones I use, I let all my patrons know that my perfumes are very intimate wearing because I work with naturals. Naturals are an example of that. Some naturals are surprisingly potent, though. I'm looking at blackcurrant bud or buchu, which is very potent. But some materials, by their very nature, whether natural or synthetic, they can get easily collapsed or dampened. So if a perfumer has an end goal, if their concept is, say, for example, I'm doing a week of osmanthus fragrances, I think it would be very difficult for a perfumer to translate something into osmanthus and also have it be a beast, because osmanthus isn't a beastly I mean, it's a very delicate and beautiful aroma. Yes. So many osmanthus fragrances, I hear people say, well, if only it lasted longer, if only it was stronger. But if it had the ability to last longer or be stronger, then it really wouldn't smell like osmanthus and osmanthus accord anymore. It would turn into something else. And there's a lot of things like that. There's actually a fragrance that I wanted to share from Anik Goutal that I have sitting down here, and I find to be quite beautiful. This is pardon me, my office chair is very creaky. This is Anik Goutal's Duel.
Mhm.
And this is this is a tea scent with a mate accord, and this is another example of I wouldn't want it any other way. It may not last longer than 4 or 5 hours. It may be an intimate skin scent, but I actually wouldn't want it any other way because it wouldn't smell the way it is. A perfumer wouldn't be able to make that experience be more loud or long because it would compromise the integrity of what is being conveyed.
The integrity of that, exactly. Because then when something is lasting forever and ever, we're not getting the nuance. We're not getting all the aspects of the osmanthus that she wants us to notice, right? And instead, we're making her into a mud brick of because we believe it's important for things to be very, very high concentration, or we think it's important to have a lot of expensive absolutes, and that's what makes a fragrance good because it has a bunch of stuff in it.
Right.
Or
right.
Something that I have learned is that often, like how, my bestie is an attorney, and she will say that it's always more interesting to her what people don't say than what they do. And so I think about that it's almost more interesting what's not in a perfume than what is. Because it's the things that you don't notice that make the perfume beautiful, that make it blossom and bloom and lift and give life instead of suffocating a beautiful osmanthus or anything else with more everything.
Right. Imagine a perfumer trying to do an osmanthus perfume and making the decision to extend it with a lot of ambroxan, or to extend it with a lot of I don't know. I mean, I don't want to bash certain things. None of these are inherently wrong.
It's an easy target.
It's an easy target though because it's overused. It isn't inherently bad.
Super, you could say, or something.
Yeah. They're not inherently bad, but they have been overused in a lot of commercial perfumery and even in niche perfumery. Because I think that niche houses, especially the ones that are kind of like corp consolidation and niche clothing, like they want to give off this sort of exclusivity or luxury, but they also are listening too much to the demands of a certain customer who wants that. So they're not able to, they don't release something that has that delicateness to it because people are just so concerned about whether or not it's detected.
And they're also beholden to their shareholders who want them to make ISOE Super and Ambroxan are dirt cheap.
Yeah.
And you can throw in a ton of it, and then you're pleasing the people who want what they want, as you are describing, and they can make it for a lot less money and make much more profit. Yeah. Everything wonderful must at some point end. Darren, this is exactly what I was thinking when you were talking about the sort of, I think what you're describing is one of the perfumery life lessons from Perfumery that I've learned, that how unhealthy it is to cling neurotically to something, wanting it to last forever. And that's really unbalanced and unhealthy. Everything can't last forever. It shouldn't. And the fact that we expect it to, want it to, it's one of those things that I think is trying to tell us something about where perfume is trying to tell us something about ourselves, something much bigger than what it smells like or even what it makes us remember. Mm-hmm. But it's telling us something, maybe about something, a shadow aspect of ourselves, or maybe not necessarily a shadow, but something else about ourselves. I know this is getting like super abstract. I don't know.
No.
You guys are the right people to talk to. I don't know how others feel about that.
Sebastian,
that's the essence of perfumery. It's abstractionism at its best, because we cannot touch it, we cannot see it, we cannot taste it. Well,
Better not.
It depends. But all we can do is smell, and like it's one of the most beautiful abstract forms there is to me. BBC has a wonderful documentary about perfume. I'm pretty sure most of us have seen it. And Jean-Claude Ellena is interviewed in this. Oh my goodness, I just said it. So in this documentary, and he was still working for Hermès at the time. And he says that he doesn't try to recreate reality. He finds reality too boring. So all his perfumes are inspired in dreams and in illusions, because illusion and dreams are much more beautiful than reality. And I associate so deeply with that, because like I don't like smelling super realistic perfumes. Like, give me something that I can dream of. Give me something that can take me to a fairy tale land, or something that will take me to Mordor, or to a painting that will put me inside this painting, or
I love that.
That will put me inside this movie. And it's just like, that's what perfume does to me, and that's what a beautiful perfume does to me. It puts me in places. It takes me, it transports me to different places, and I don't want to be in those places for 12 hours, or for if it takes me to a place just for 2 hours, it's enough. It's like Darren, I believe, said, like, everything wonderful must end. Like, everything else ends. Everything ends. Nothing is forever. Everything is fleeting. Like, life, we die. There's a quote in the beginning of The Great Gatsby: all beautiful things, all the bright, beautiful things fade so fast and they don't come back. Perfume does that for us. We can revive it. We can relive it again every time it's sprayed on. And I think there's nothing out there like perfume.
It's Mary Poppins. What enough is as good as a feast, she said. Yeah. I think to Michael, and I just love that. Oh my goodness, we're talking about The Great Gatsby and Mary Poppins, and I just want to stay here forever.
And I'm about to bring to the attention the Buddhist principle of impermanence.
Yes, my man Buddha.
So impermanence is the only thing that's certain. The only certain thing is that everything ceases. We all are going to die. And I know that might be depressing to certain people who have a difficult time confronting those things. But the real eye-opener, if you want to find your come to Jesus moment in life, it's confronting that. It's confronting the fact that things are impermanent, and to accept that, because when you accept that, you're not always sort of like, missing the past and being anxious about the future.
Yes. And then we can realize that we are causing our own suffering by our expectations, any expectations in general, really, that this is going to be a good time, or this person's going to screw me over, or, this is going to be a great day. I'm going to love this perfume. Or I'm going to hate it. I wish this would last forever. It
all of these,
our own suffering.
It causes our own suffering. Yeah. And it's funny, a lot of these things that we look at in perfume as perfume enthusiasts are metaphorical. We could see it as sort of a mirror of maybe some other things, like if only if only this fragrance was to give me joy, and that joy would just last and last and last and last. Well, look at existence in general. Joy is not meant to last.
No.
What gives joy value is the fact that there is a liminal space between.
Yes, that's what makes it special. That's what makes us able to experience it at all.
Yeah.
Because of the duality.
Yeah.
The dual nature.
It has its very value because of suffering. And if we're running away from suffering, then what we're doing with the joy is we're not giving it, its proper due when you're in the moment.
Yeah.
And so it's a perfect metaphor for what we're talking about. You sit there and you just experience the fragrance mindfully. I know mindfulness has become kind of cliched for some people, but let's just sort of, fake it till we make it for a bit. To be present with anything, include whether it's food or with the company of somebody that you love, or if you've traveled somewhere. The same thing goes with fragrance. You will get much more joy out of it if you pay attention to it moment by moment and not worry about what's going to happen next. Go ahead.
It's like when you're having so much fun, you forget to take pictures.
Exactly. Because you're not looking to make the experience real to the rest of the world. It just is. It is real.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I love the most, it's coming back to a perfume that from my collection that I haven't worn in 3-4 months, and falling in love with that over again and rediscovering that perfume and getting different nuances of it, and just like, oh my God, this is so good. The rest recently happened to me with Shalimar. Actually, I love Shalimar. I've worn it for a few years now, but something that I was never able to get was the super powdery aspects of it. A lot of people are able to detect, and I was not able to fully detect until recently. I wore it one day and I was like, oh, it's so powdery today. It's so good. And like, oh, I love it. So it was a different nuance that I got it that I hadn't, been able to perceive before. And I just, it just made me fall in love even more. And I find that weather is something that also can make you detect.
Yes, this is so true of the tower in particular that you have been trying, JJ. Mm-hmm. It's very much, and that I think makes it more interesting. I was worried about that myself for that, because people, I think, well, what if they think, well, I wanted to wear this because I wanted to smell like this for this reason, or because that's what I was in the mood for. But today it was cold and rainy and it didn't smell the same way that it did when I was in Arkansas last week or whatever. I think that can be very interesting. I have been concerned about that to the wearer, from the wearer's perspective. But I think in the frag head world, that's probably okay. Maybe.
Well, yeah, because when you've reached that level of enthusiasm, you start to think about things like, well, what will this feel like when it's a rainy day or when it's humid? Mm-hmm. How will this react when it's a dry day or cold? And also even just, the temperature of your own skin. It's amazing how I think that a fragrance is really settled. And then I'll go out for a brisk walk and it's reignited through the heat of my skin. And I get kind of giddy over it because it's like, ooh, it's still there. And it's been sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of reanimated on the skin. I love that.
It's like breathing new life in and showing you another side. It's the same scent profile, the same juice, it's the same thing, but that's one of the exciting aspects of fragrance, is that how much it can change. And that when you read, I have been talking about this lately, that a note list and versus an ingredient list, and that two identical note lists are not going to smell the same at all.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Because there's so many different.
Sometimes can be hard to, we look at the note, I don't like this or that.
Yeah.
Or I love Texas cedarwood. I'm going to love this. You might not, because that Texas cedarwood is not interacting with the other materials the same way that it does in your other scent that you love.
Yeah, yeah. Because there's different synergies that are fascinating there. If, for example, the fragrance that I had reviewed today, Chemonanth from Diptyque, that I loved that there was this synergy between the Osmanthus Absolute, because there's a lot of Osmanthus Absolute in it, and this camphor. It's like I never, I would have never expected that combination, but it turns out this particular fragrance is supposed to evoke this incense that has camphor leaves in it, and spices and sandalwood. So I just you would never get that sensation from osmanthus and camphor alone, but the two of them together, it's kind of like painting, where it's like you get this tint or a shade that if it were not for the fact that they, whatever you're using, whether, it's a certain, adding a little black or a little white or something, like without that, you don't have that it's the same idea. It feels different.
It is. It reminds me of in Mandy Aftel's book, and I forget the name of it. It's the orange and black cover. Vireo Perfumes bought it for me for my birthday one year.
I think it's Essence and Alchemy.
That might be it. It probably I should really know the name of it, and I can't. It's in the other room though. But she talks about materials having their own personalities, some being louder than others. When one enters the room, that the Turkish rose is big, loud, saucy, and very Sophia Loren, I like to compare her to, and is totally influenced by their friends and the people who are around them. I don't think that she says it that way. I think that I might just think of it that way, or have thought about it that way in other conversations I've had with perfumers. But when materials get together, they behave differently. That's not how Turkish rose acts when it's with vetiver versus Virginia cedarwood. I don't know.
Yeah, this is what building a certain, building accords, are just they don't just involve like a discrete note.
Yes.
Because there are other accords, other themes. I love the combination of rose and vetiver or geranium and vetiver. I love the way that works. And to me, that's like a unique feel. Like it's the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes.
That's one example of it. And you couldn't achieve that same thing without those two put together. It's sort of an alchemy, essence and alchemy, like the name of the book.
Indeed it
is. So we're going to do a brief intermission. So the intermission involves some visual art and some music. This is a sort of a palate cleanser before we move to part 2.
I'm going to fill up my Arnie Palmer.
Okay. All right. I'm going to bring that up. And just a moment.
When do we come back?
Oh, you can stay. You can watch. It's just a brief intermission until it's finished. It's like a minute, not even.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's some video art.
Okay, all right.
We'll get this started here. All right. Now we've reached part 2. So that's actually some video art from, I think it's 1981, David Sieg. Yeah. Oh, there it is. It wants to keep going. I thought it was. I thought it had stopped, so I'll remove that here. Okay, that was our brief intermission.
Love it.
And All right, Sebastian, I want to see what your next selection is. I know that you have a lot of them, so I wanted to hear more of your thoughts on some of the things that you'd like to share.
Well, this conversation actually has put me in the mood because I'm not wearing anything today because I decided to pick something from my selection, and it put me in the mood to wear Bruma from Cire Trudon. This label, it's a bit, has seen its best days.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, Bruma. As you can tell, I love this perfume. I've worn all of this, and this is just dreamy, waxy, heavy, drippy iris. Very hypnotic, yes, indeed. I love this perfume. I don't know if you're familiar with the Trudon perfumes.
I would love to sample a few of them. I've heard some wonderful things, and I think that you may did you not do a video on this one, Sebastian? On this particular one, I know that you did one on one of the Trudon, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe I mentioned this one.
Okay.
On the one I think it took this to Brazil last year, so I might have mentioned this one. This is actually when the label got damaged, but this is a dark iris. It's Persolaise did a review on this, a short review on this, and I agree with everything he said about this perfume. It's one of those people that you just want to know more because they're so interesting. And this is very interesting. It's a dark iris, but it has this chiaroscuro kind of thing going on. Because at the same time that it has a dark profile, it's very inviting and it's whispering to you in some ways, and it's just like he mentioned the word dominatrix, and I can see that, but it's very elegant. It's very elegant. So this is going to be my scent of the day. So, and if like it lasts on me, this lasts quite a bit. Also because of the way I apply. So I mean, just
wallow in it. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, Sebastian, is that also next to you? The it looks like a candle holder or some. Is that also from Trudon?
Yes. I actually forgot how this is called, but it's a scent diffuser.
Oh, it's a scent diffuser. Okay.
Yeah, you get the cameos, and then you put the cameo on top, and then there's a little spoon. Put the cameo on top of the spoon, and then then you light the candle in the bottom, and then this helps to diffuse also the light. I forgot how this is called.
I love the color of the glass, and I feel like I've seen. Aren't some of the bottles of the fragrances in a similar color glass, or maybe or are they all clear bottles? I don't know. I feel like I've seen that color in the brand before.
The fragrances are all clear, but
okay.
With the exception of they just launched a new one, which is I forgot the name of the perfume, but it's the second edition of one they already had for it's incense, and it's a black bottle. But as you can tell, the color of the cat
yes,
that color is this, and this is la promenose. This is called so the color of the candle jars is this green. So classically, all their classic candles come in a vessel that is this color, and but they have limited editions. Like every Christmas, they come with some different ones. But this green is the color of the candle holders.
I just wanted to thank J.O. I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank J.O. For buying a cup of coffee. It's much appreciated. He says, very pleasant panel tonight. Thank you so much, my friend. If anybody else would like to purchase a coffee or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, here is the website, www.buymeacoffee.com/Joseph Kolb P. Just wanted to bring to light some great comments that I've seen coming through, including one from Emily. That video reminded me of when I took acid as a kid, sitting by a fountain and marveling at how the water was blossoming. Love it. That's amazing. Yeah, that's kind of like my way of taking acid without taking acid, is just watching like psychedelic video art. And
it's
and
totally
just...
good enough. I don't need or want anything else. I can turn it off when I want to. We don't have to.
Right.
I'm trying to tell you a comment that it's that what is Victoria's Secret? She said something about sampling through, speeding through samples.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's actually a few comments that she wanted to share. She's been on a roll. So there's this one. I think the book was Fragrant. Okay, that's the other book. Yeah, Fragrant. Yeah, that's the one that's in sort of like this pinkish, reddish with like a black border. Yeah, Fragrant. It's a wonderful book that focuses on the materials: frankincense, cinnamon, ambergris, and jasmine, if I remember correctly. And then also, I'm going to bring up her other comments. It's a little bit further back, I believe.
What is Victoria's Secret? Figure it out, man.
Ooh!
Oh, that was me, sorry.
It's okay. Is this? Oh, it is terrifying to perfumers that people might need samples, not give a perfume any time as top notes or casual conversation at a party before getting to know someone more interestingly. Yeah, that's important too. Is like, just say, for example, with the first, the 3 first impressions that I always do at the beginning of each effluvium, is I go into that with the understanding that that is only an introduction. It is only pretty much the top notes. And we need to understand that when we are testing on a mouillet or a test strip, the evaporation rate is a lot slower. So you are experiencing the top notes in a very different way than you would on the skin. It only gives you sort of part of the picture. So it's important to, you can start with the paper to get, I call it sort of a sketch, a rough idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're ready, then you sample on the skin, and then you go for a test drive. Yeah. You go for a test drive. You get to know it and see if you two are a match. If you feel good about the relationship, or if it's
courtship.
Yes, it's like the courtship. And you sit with it for a while, and maybe you wear it another time. Maybe if you're ambivalent, this happens to me all the time. I sample it first and I'm ambivalent. It's like there are aspects of it that I like, but there are aspects of it that still puzzle me, and I need to kind of get to know it a little bit better. So I'll wear it a second time. Usually by the second time or the third time, I get an idea as to whether or not it's something that resonates with me. And that's something that I recommend to anyone, to just give things a chance, unless it is something that is so demonstrably dissonant and confusing and foul, and it has certain things in it that immediately, like you can't get past it. For example, top notes that you wouldn't want to sit through, you wouldn't want to wait through, you wouldn't want to endure. Or if it's, I think a lot of us who are experienced in smelling a lot of fragrances, we can tell if maybe a perfumer is, not as skillful and they can't really blend something. It's like, it's okay to pass a judgment because you can make that kind of assessment. It's kind of like with the experience over time. Yeah. So that's okay. But for the most part, if it seems to be a perfumer who kind of knows their onions, like, just give it a little bit more time, wear it a few times. Yeah.
That's something I'd love to talk about, to expound upon, when we're talking about, you can, when you're very experienced with smelling a lot of perfumes or have dabbled as you have, JJ. I think that, and I've tried to ask this question of perfumers, and maybe I'm just not really phrasing the question very well, because the answers I get are not exactly what I was looking for. But I think besides skill that we can detect, technical skill in a perfume, I think that a composition can also is also a mirror. You evoked that concept of mirror and fragrance earlier, to the perfumer's mindset and personality. And I have tried to ask perfumers sometimes, what is it? How does your personality go into your bottle? You know, like, what is it about you that goes in there that I can learn about you from your fragrance? And I don't know if the question is unclear. Maybe it's just people aren't interested in thinking that way, which is fine, I guess. But usually the answers I get are things like, well, they're based on my experiences, or I've always been a very creative person. And I think, well, I would hope so. But I think that's another area where there's so much more potential, and it can actually be very too revealing. I think there are certain things that I smell that I have made that I think this is too exposing of me.
Right.
But then you smell other things and you think this is a very disciplined person. This is a very focused, very intellectual perfumer. Or wow, this person just thinks more is more, and just is not is phoning it in. You know, I think you can start to notice this person takes shortcuts, and so then I start to wonder about who that perfumer is as a person.
Right. The concept, the story, the concepts and stories are such a big part, such a compelling part, especially, when it's a new house. You want to know where they came out of a void and what is it they want to convey. I think that's a big part of it. Of course, I do also believe in like allowing yourself to be open to your own interpretations and don't let ad copy completely influence your impression on a fragrance, just as much as you don't want a notes pyramid too. But I like concept. I like houses that have a narrative, some sort of narrative that they're telling some sort of story. And I think it's very important, especially with new houses today. I was just watching a live stream of Donna Sandhu, and she said that, when visiting Essence, there's so many of these houses that are coming up, but there's very little in the way of concept. It's sort of like...
Then that brings to something that I was just talking about that, because how much of freedom of creation are we talking about here? Because, when we talk about big brands, perfumers don't have that much freedom to express their feelings through their creations.
Yes.
And Guerlain is a good example, because in the past they did. Not anymore. I had the pleasure of meeting Thierry Vasseur once, and I talked to him I asked him some questions, and he said that, he doesn't have a lot of freedom anymore, and he doesn't even have the freedom to come up with the name of the perfume. It's the marketing team that decides the name of the perfume. And it's the marketing team that decides where this perfume is going to be available, what's the bottle, what it's going to look like. He doesn't have a lot of freedom to come up with that kind of stuff. So it's a very tricky thing, because if you're talking about big brands, they don't have. I think that today the bigger brands where the perfumers have the most freedom, that's judging from my own, I guess, experience or just guessing, would be Cartier, because Delphine Jacques, not Delphine Jacques. Oh my God, I forgot her name. Forgot her name, but yes, she has a lot of freedom, and because of some interviews that she has given, also some concept perfume that she came up with, one of them being number 11 from the Les Arts du Parfum. It was something she wanted to create, and she had the total freedom, and she did it, and it was just fantastic. And also Hermès, I believe Christine Nagel has a lot of freedom, as Jean-Claude Ellena had. And if you watch the documentary from BBC, the Perfume one, you can see that he did have a lot of freedom with Hermès. And but I don't think most perfumers today have, like Antoine Lee from that, that he created this perfume. He also created Eugene's perfume.
Indeed.
Created 2 perfumes for Maison Trudon, which is Cire Trudon, the candle company. And the second one he created, the advertising for it on YouTube. It's a pretty much an interview with him, and he explaining the thought process and how he is enjoying working with smaller brands in terms of distribution of perfume and concept of ideas for perfumes, because he feels more free to express his artistry, what
Right.
he really loves to do, which he condemns, like he says, it's been lost in a lot in today's perfumery. And it's sad to say this, but for the last few years, I don't chase for new creations anymore. I don't follow. I don't try to get my nose in everything that's coming out, because I find that it's very redundant. There's a lot of the same, and it makes me sad. But then I smell. But there's so much out there that it's even hard to keep track.
Mm.
But a lot of it I just don't. I don't know. So it has.
Were you thinking of Matillion for Cartier?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
one. Yes.
Can I add something on to that, Sebastian?
Please.
Yeah, in those large houses, it sounds just absolutely soulless and reduced to marketing, as you're describing. It sounds awful to me. The thing about indie perfume is that we don't have those constraints. We can do whatever we want. But this, I'll tell you what really chaps my ass is that when we talk about a narrative and a story, how many of us really understand what a story is?
Yeah.
A story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and something happens. It's not just I'm sitting under an apple tree in my mother's backyard, and isn't that lovely? Who cares? Who effing cares about what it looks like where you are? That's only a part of it. There's so much more. There's something has to happen. It's a journey. It's not just what it looks like and who was there. It's what was the third act, the big reveal. What happened? How did things change?
And that's something that I'm missing a lot in most of the most recent perfumes. When we talk about the classics, oh god, the classics offer that in abundance. We're
Yes.
talking about Mitsuko and Shalimar and Vol de Nuit. They take us to places, and we're boarding the plane, and then we're flying overnight, and we see the forest down, through the window. And Mitsuko, like I said when I described it, it's walking into this forest. It's damp, and when I see a lot of things, and then I get out of it at one point, and then I see something else, and but that's the power of something that reflects, I guess, the creations that are that are coming out, the perfumes that are coming out in the most recent years reflect a lot of what people want, which is strength. They want power, staying power. And they want loud because they want attention, and they want to be, noticed. And what does that speak about people in general? What does that speak about, our society today?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's something else. And because, I'm not, as you can probably tell by now, I'm not about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And you can see this in just the role of image. It kind of that it's all part and parcel of being image conscious, especially those who do what they can, especially in this age of social media, to get validation, to get to get the attention, to make them feel valid, to make them feel respected and loved, and the amount of filters that people will put on their photos, or the amount of work that they will do on their on their face, taking it to that level, fillers. And it just seems to be another element of that in this age of excess, it gets excessive, that in order to be substantial, in order to be likable, in order to, to have some sort of meaning and purpose, it needs to be like that, and it just translates into perfume as well.
There's so many things that translate into perfume. I this is something that I think other women of a certain age, like myself, are probably going through, that it seems, with every passing year, your social worth declines, because you're getting older as a woman. And that's a really, really hard realization, if we have put so much of our self-worth and our focus on our physicality our whole lives, and that stuff doesn't last forever. So when it's gone, you're in a bad place if you have nothing else.
It's like,
so what would I do if I was relying on social media for all of my dopamine? What would I do if that was taken away? I would, Yeah,
I can't remember who told me this, or where I read or something, or where it came from, but it says like beauty can only take you so long. It literally can only take you so long. After that, after the first, oh, you're beautiful. Like, what else do you have to offer?
Yeah.
And it's kind of being forgotten, I guess. And it's we're living very interesting times.
I wanted to highlight a comment from a little bit earlier and just sort of address it a little way back, and just sort of give a response to it. So Duncan says it's ridiculous to wait for the top notes to dissipate, and I just want to make the argument that it may seem that way at first, but you may be reeled in by the top notes, but as it develops, that could take a turn for the worse. So I don't think it's really that ridiculous. There are a lot of fragrances that have not so linear development, where they open up so promising, and they get you with that. It's kind of like a bait and switch with certain perfumes.
It is that I'm convinced that's what they're, I don't know that it's a conspiracy, but by the use of certain materials, they certainly do that in settings where they don't want you to hang around and wear it forever. Do you think Saks wants you to walk around and come back in 3 hours? No, they want to get you now.
Yeah, they want you to smell it and say, I'll buy it. Yeah. So a lot of fragrances are front loaded. I call it front loading, where it's like they put all the best of the best at the opening.
Yes.
And then it just sort of kind of bottoms out into something pretty generic. Like turns.
It's those perfumes that are like, oh, sorry, no, I cannot give you all that. It was just like, hi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with his comment, I can associate in part, because when it comes to vintages, I don't. That's something that prevents me from diving into vintages, because it's always a gamble when you're talking about vintages, because I love my perfumes to give me beauty from opening to the very end. If I have to wait for a perfume to start getting better after half an hour because the top notes have gone off, to me that's not as pleasant of an experience, and it takes away from the moment and from the experience, from the perfume itself. That's why I love people say, "Oh my God, vintages were so much better back in the day." Blah, blah.
Yeah.
Well, were they really like it? Are our memories really capturing what they were? Because I don't remember, like, I made the same recipe last week, but it tasted different last week than it did now, or not. It tastes exactly the same, but my perceptions have changed, because my taste, I taste something different this time.
Yeah.
And when notes go off, and they become the kind of metallic kind of off thing, I can't do it. So I prefer to just, I either love what they're offering today or I don't, and move on. There's so many beautiful perfumes out there.
People would drag you through the coals for that, because there's so many people who are so obsessed with vintages. Now, I speak as somebody, obviously, Sebastian, I have a lot of vintages and I collect vintages, but I'm more of a realist when it comes to being, a vintage enthusiast. And it's only one part of what I love, because I also am not of the camp who says that vintages are inherently better, because of the very reason that you bring up. It's because you have to, being a vintage collector and enthusiast is such a serious gamble. Because so many times I have been horrified and heartbroken because I'll buy something in the hopes that it will have had some sort of preservation. And all of those carbon chains have been broken and everything's terpenized and acetylized and sour and turned and burnt and the top notes, or I'll get a vintage where it's just gone.
Yeah.
It was left in a hot place and it got burnt. Those things get burned off. So I've said this time and again with people who are these hardcore vintage enthusiasts that you have to be more of a realist about it. And it gets my goat when people say like vintages, the times of vintages were so much better. It's not for who.
Something that happened to me recently, not that recently, but it did happen recently, was I love Calèche, Hermès Calèche. And my favorite one is the Soie de Parfum, which is more delicate. And someone was selling a vintage, and it seemed to be in really good condition. And so I bought it, and I said, okay. And I was so excited when I got it. And when I sprayed it on, first I was not notified that it was a tester. I don't really have anything against testers per se, but they are a bit tricky for me because they can be a little bit harder to track, and where they come from and stuff like that. But and then as soon as I put it on, the top notes were gone. So I had to wait for about 45 minutes to start getting the beauty that I love from the cream Calèche that I love very much. So I just couldn't keep it. So I just ended up returning it. And also happened recently with a bottle of Femme de Rochas, and I love that perfume. And it was a vintage parfum in a 7.5 ml, sealed, perfect condition. It seemed, but when I opened it and I put it on, it smelled like pure vinegar, and I just it was just sad, I just something that I could have, So
I pose a question? Oh, sorry.
We'll get to your question in just a second, but I just wanted to just sort of continue sort of like a point that I'm making about being somebody who's a vintage collector, because I'm a huge vintage collector. People have known me for but I think it's irresponsible as a vintage collector for me to encourage people to spend a lot of money on vintages, because it's a huge risk. And to also to be patient and really bear in mind who is selling it and whether or not they are an experienced seller, because if they're not an experienced seller, they don't know anything about preserving fragrance. You don't know where it's been sitting, for how long. Just be scrupulous about it. And also just, I would caution not to have this behavior that Perfumery was uniformly better than. Perfumery has changed. It's always in flux. It hasn't gotten better. It hasn't gotten worse. It just has moved. It's sort of moved in different places. What used to be brilliant perfume on a department store counter now is in a luxury boutique, or it's through niche perfumery. It's changed for the consumer. So I just want to express that I'm not for the whole vintage was better thing ad nauseum. No, I don't think vintage was inherently better. The end. All right, Emily.
I was thinking about Sebastian, as you were talking about something that as you remember it, and it doesn't smell that way, even like a meal too, cooking, I made this last week. It tasted so much better. I don't know why. Or vice versa. And you think about fragrances from yesteryear. Are there any that, even though you both are vintage fans, are there any that you would never want to go back to because you want it to live in your mind the way it was, and you don't want to be disappointed and for it to be ruined?
That's a great question.
Great question. I'll go ahead quickly, because I just pretty much think of anything from my adolescence, and it's not because I want to hold those memories dear. it's that it reminds me of like not so great memories. so anything that I know it's true. And it's like people ask me like, well, you have all of these classics, but why do you not have Drakkar Noir or Obsession for Men? It's because I lived through wearing them so much during times that were probably the most difficult times of my life. So I have other fragrances that are similar to them in a similar vein, but they're just dissimilar enough that they don't take me right back. So there's like other fragrances of a similar genre that I appreciate more so because they are just different enough. But yeah, that's the reason why I don't revisit a lot of those, because adolescence wasn't the hottest time of my life. All right, Sebastian.
What happened to me was actually interesting and sad at the same time, because Chanel Sycamore, it reminds me a lot of Christmas time when I was a kid at this specific place. Was my aunt's cottage, and nobody wore Chanel Sycamore there. None of my family. Nobody I know for a fact, but the place itself, the time of the year, the Christmas ornaments, the coolness of the flooring, a bunch of different facts evoke Sycamore to me. So it's just like, I don't know why, but it's just Sycamore is exactly like Christmas time there. And funny thing, I got a sample of that because I had samples of it, and then I showed my sister and said, "This just reminds you of something." She never smelled that perfume before, and then she smelled and said, "Christmas at the cottage." And I said, "So I'm not alone. So it's not crazy." But this connects because I love Sycamore. It has this very special place in my heart because of that memory, especially. But and that's the eau de toilette. I never wanted to buy it because I was afraid of, if I wore it, I would disassociate from that memory. Every time I would smell it, I wouldn't go back to that place anymore. So it came to a point that I didn't buy the eau de toilette. They did the change to the eau de parfum. And then when I smelled eau de parfum, I couldn't connect. That the memory wasn't, the connection wasn't there. But then I still had a sample of the eau de toilette, and the eau de toilette still did have the connection. So I didn't search for it, but eventually I found a bottle of the eau de toilette. I bought it, and I started wearing it. So long story short, that connection is there just in memory, because now when I wear the eau de toilette, I don't feel that. I don't go to that place anymore. I just know that memory, it's somewhere in here. But I disassociated from that, emotional connection that I had. It was very strong. So if I could go back in time, I wouldn't touch Sycamore at all. We just keep a sample of it just to go back to it every now and then, to go back to the place, because now... So I would take the eau de parfum instead of the eau de toilette and keep the eau de toilette just as a sample. So, to go back every few years.
I love that. I actually kind of love that. That is a very specific way of having a relationship with a fragrance that maybe a lot of people haven't thought of. Where we just take for granted that we're going to wear a fragrance and wear it at whatever time at any sort of time. But to be so specific about holding on to that memory and not to squander it. There's something pretty profound about that. I'm kind of inspired by that in a way, that, to wear something at a certain time in my life and to only revisit it, to go back to that and not, that's great stuff. I just wanted to give Duncan an opportunity to clarify and explain himself. So he said, he's just saying that if the top notes are going to put me in a bad mood, it's rare, if never, the rest of the wearing will change the initial displeasure. So now we get where you're talking about, and we actually kind of went over that a little bit. It is true, Okay. Why wait for the dry down of the top notes? I mean, I do read a lot of reviews like that as well, where it's like, the top notes might be a little too tough to handle, for the first 20 minutes. So I get it. I think I'm a little bit more forgiving with certain fragrances that might be intense for the first, however amount of time. But I totally understand that. If you want your experience to be something power, like favorable from the very beginning, far be it from me to tell you otherwise, that makes a lot more sense. So sorry about that, Dunk.
I couldn't agree more. Why must we suffer? This is hardly a necessity. This isn't a medical procedure we have to just suffer through.
Yeah.
It's totally non-essential. Why should I suffer?
Yeah. And I've done a lot of first impressions live where, I will go back and I'll realize the dry down isn't so bad. It's kind of nice, but it just isn't worth it. When something is just so, disagreeable, why endure it just to get through it? Yeah.
Duncan asked a question also too. He was asking to Darren Allen, and I wanted to weigh in if I could.
Sure. Was it a more recent comment? I'll see if I can.
It was fairly recent, I think.
Let's see if I can locate.
Wondering if he should get Chypre #1 or Fête de Noël.
All right. I'm trying to locate it so we can show. Oh, here we go. I have sort of a backlog to share a few comments here. We'll do that afterwards. So yes.
I love them both personally. I have to say that if you the Fête Noël, you I'm sure have tried JJ, and it has that lovely tuberose, absolutely just stunning is the word. I think stunning. I want to share my funny story about the first time I wore Chypre #1. So I put it on, and my husband and I were going to breakfast at some yucky diner, near down the street. Nothing nice at all. And I drank the worst mimosas out of a pitcher. It was the grossest. There was a guy behind me who was drinking Michelob Light or something at 9 a.m, which I guess why would you judge if you're drinking trashy mimosas? Who am I suppose? But I was remarking about how I felt like I was this skinny 1930s Guerlain model. I felt so good. I just smelled like a skinny Guerlain model, I suppose. While stuffing my face with pancakes, I imagine. And then realized that my shirt was on inside out and backwards.
Oh, goodness.
It was the worst. It was so disrespectful, the Chypre #1.
That's pretty funny. That's awesome. All right, I want to just catch up on the comments here. Hold on. Where was I last? Lots of hype about vintage, but I don't cart to. I don't know what you meant by that, Danny. I don't care to. Maybe that's okay if you don't care to. But if you ever do, I can be your guide to help you not make the mistakes a lot of vintage enthusiasts make. See, that's kind of I feel like I'm sort of a steward to people to not make a mistake, not make the mistakes I did as a vintage collector, because it isn't as easy as just dropping money and then finding something that you want and say, "Hey, I got it."
Do you know something?
A lot of heartache, a lot of
Sherpa.
Something that I find interesting too, that a lot of people, I don't know if they don't want to get. I don't know, but I have a good friend that her mother adored Sublime from Jean Patou, and that was the perfume she wore most of the time. She had bottles and bottles of it, backups and backups of it, and she had never smelled. So she hadn't smelled it since her mother passed away, which was many years ago. So I said, I'm going to bring you a brand new bottle of the current Sublime. So I brought it to her, and she smelled, and she opened it right there, and then she sprayed it, and she said, and she closed her eyes and said, "Yes, this is my mom. It's just how I remember." And that's something that I find interesting, because we're talking about a vintage, formulation that was produced in the 90s, 80s.
Yeah, 92, yeah.
And she just smelled a brand new, production, a brand new formulation, as people like to say, of the same perfume. And she said it smells exactly the same as she remembers.
Yeah.
So she went away, and she brought a bottle of one that her mother was actually wearing at the time that had like half full, and she gave it to me and she said, "Compare. It's exactly the same," and it is exactly the same. And the only difference is, the vintage, the older one, it's older. it
It's
has a lot
older.
more.
Yep,
It has a lot more.
exactly.
It has a lot more oxygen in it because
Mhm.
it was half used. But if you break down the perfume, it's the same, and I find that happens to most of the perfumes. Of course, not to all, because indeed some perfumes do change a lot over time. But I find that a lot of people, like especially the Guerlains, I've smelled a lot of vintage Guerlains, and I love the current ones, especially the extracts. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't chase the vintages because it's a gamble, and
It's a huge gamble.
and I'm very, very, very happy with what they offer now because it's still very faithful to what they were. The ingredients are fantastic. The quality is there, and it still takes me to the same place. So I don't. So that's for me. But yeah, it's very interesting how a lot of people want to think that things smell different in the past when in a lot of cases they didn't. It's just the same. Maybe your memory is tricking, but I don't know. That's something I find interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I think it has. It can have something to do with the memory being a little, memory is an interesting, not to go off on a huge tangent on the way memory works too, but our memory gets sort of like written over and kind of shaped and sculpted by our subsequent experiences later in life shape our memories of the past. And it's hard to prevent that from happening. So I think that does play a huge role. And also in terms of people who do have this fetishism, if you will, for vintages. I've said this in the past. I can't help but to think that maybe they've gotten so attuned to fragrances in their partially degraded state that they kind of appreciate that. But what they may fail to consider is that those vintages that they're enjoying are definitely not how they were meant to be smelled. And I take for example something like Mitsuko. I talked to some major Guilanophiles, and they would say to me, don't listen to people who say you got to get a vintage Mitsuko, because part of the spirit of Mitsuko are the sparkling bergamot. If you're going to get a vintage of Mitsuko that's over 20, 25 years old, even just 20, 25 years old, we're talking a 90s Mitsuko, you're not going to have that sparkle from the bergamot. And I try to tell this to people, like I can count on just two hands the amount of vintage fragrances I have where the bergamot has been preserved if they've been 30 or 40 years old. It happens. It does. Otherwise, like there would be no point in collecting any vintage. But I have a very huge collection. Obviously, I have a very pathological issue with collecting fragrance. But only 20, I think, out of all of them, there is something pristine. And that's telling you something. That's very uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
So I listened to the Guilanophiles, and I bought a newer bottle of Mitsuko, and tell you what, like it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. Like what more do I need? And don't even get me started with the oak moss conversation too.
Oh, I was gonna say it's remarkable that anything can remain considering the changes and in restrictions and such.
But it's possible because there are ways of reconstructing an oak moss.
But there's something like the Fragrance Vault, something like that. I don't remember. They're from England, and they did a video with Melissa McCarthy, I think it's her name, and she talks about that. She talks about oak moss has not been banned. Oak moss is still available, but it has to have the specific molecule removed from this specific amount of quantity that is allowed to be used in a perfume. But yet people still insist to say that oak moss is banned, but still there are ways to created that are very faithful.
Mhm.
And I have like a bunch of perfumes, current ones that have that were created recently or produced recently, I should say, that have beautiful oak moss. Like even Mitsuko itself. Mitsuko is a great example of stunning
Yes.
oak moss that
Yes.
I don't know what is the gala. I don't know if they use the natural one or the non-natural one, but it's there. We have a beautiful oak moss here in the perfume that it's fantastic, and it doesn't give me any issues.
And I'm fairly certain they put the maximum amount that is allowed because they can.
Because there is a maximum, and you can go to the maximum if you want to.
You can go to it if you want to, and it is a high impact material. I've had conversations with these vintage, nerds about how, back in the day they used to put 30% oak moss. I'm like, where on earth did you hear that they would put 30% oak moss into a composition? I don't think they'd ever put more than 2%, and that was a lot. Oak moss is a very strong fixative. I love the way it smells in isolation, but I guarantee you all these people who are obsessed with it would not love it as much in isolation because it's not meant to be a perfume unto its own,
Right.
like some materials can be. And it can be reconstructed, and it has been reconstructed. And these people who say, like, well, back in the 80s and the 70s, they used only natural oak moss, which is a load of horseshit. They used plenty of Evernil back then. Oak moss,
great again.
It's the same. It's exactly that idea. Don't even open Pandora's box. But that is the idea. That a simpler time, or
for who? Simpler for who?
Yeah, I know. Pandora's box. Got to leave it shut for tonight. But we can talk backstage. We'll leave that for backstage. So.
It's Sarah McCarthy, so just correcting that. It's Sarah McCarthy.
Oh, Sarah McCarthy. At first, I was thinking the comedian Sarah.
Yeah,
I think
no.
I was there with you. I figured it out too.
I finally it clicked when we were starting to talk about oak moss. But the truth is that even in the compositions at a time where there wasn't as much of a restriction in oak moss, there wasn't that much being used because Evernil was cheaper. Evernil's been around for a long time. Like, they would still put a small percentage of oak moss because if it's one of a kind fixative value, and then they would just bolster it with some other materials because it was just cheaper that way. And this whole idea that perfume has been ruined because of restrictions is a bit misguided. Because it's been more, commercial perfumery has been more, and I had a conversation with the great Derek, Scented Devil, Varanus Verdari. It has more to do with the industry itself and with corporate consolidation and bean counters and saving money and pleasing shareholders, not giving a shit. Right. Doesn't matter. The materials don't matter. They don't care about the materials either way. It's not a matter of that, with or without restrictions. It all started in the late 80s, and we really saw it come to surface, in the 90s, but that is exactly where that shift is almost like a shift in where you would get the kind of perfume that would be of the same caliber. I don't want to say quality because that's subjective too. Maybe caliber. I don't know. I can't find any word that is not subjective for this. But to maybe perfume that would be comparative to that of the past through the niche houses and some of the designer houses that have respect towards the art of perfumery. Because there's not many designer houses that do. But really it would end up being these independent brands or these niche brands, and now we're really seeing like the niche thing kind of close in, and now it's really just independent perfumers, more so even than niche. Sebastian, yes.
Tripler asked a question: are you really criticizing people for enjoying vintage perfumes? Can people enjoy vintage and contemporary? No, like like speaking for myself, I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just speaking why I don't hunt down vintages. It's because vintages itself, it's more of an idea. It's more of a consumer taste, like it's Michael Namika's mentions right pretty much a few comments below. I have a lot of vintages too, and I love vintages, especially the vintage style of perfumery,
Yeah.
which we're talking about heavy low, like a heavy presence of oak moss, heavy presence of tuberose, heavy presence of, like a certain style of sandalwood, like the classics. I love vintage style perfumes. But if we are talking about hunting down vintage bottles, like 20, 30, 40-year-old bottles, I don't do that because to me it's risky. So I don't really, because I enjoy a perfume from the opening to the very end. So
Hmm.
if the opening is damaged in a perfume, I don't enjoy it as much, and it doesn't do it for me. But
Right.
I
Right.
have the current of Vol de Nuit, which it's one of my favorite perfumes for life.
Mhm.
Mitsuko or Shalimar. So those are vintage perfumes because they were created in a long time ago, and they're still around. So if people love chasing vintage bottles, that's fantastic. There's a huge market for it, and
Yeah.
I am part of it too in ways. But I'm very particular with the kind of bottles that I buy. But I'm not criticizing anybody for loving vintage.
Oh, definitely not. Yeah, I mean that would be like, I mean, I wouldn't criticize somebody for doing what they're doing as far as collecting vintage and enjoying it the way they want to do it. I'm just, I mean, more than half of my collection is vintage. Honestly, it really is. That's what I came to be known for when I started doing content creation, and now I'm just appreciating perfumery from all ages and all directions. Um, but I really respect that, Sebastian, because it is risky and it can be costly, and it can, to be frank, it could be really disappointing and sad because you're left with something that you spent a lot of money with, and it may not be a very well preserved specimen, and it happens more often than not. So I don't understand people who think that every single one of their vintages is pristine. There's just no way. There just is no way. I just want to catch up on the chat a little bit.
Yes.
You kind of,
There's a
Sebastian,
few things.
kind of reminded me that there are some things to kind of catch up on.
Yeah.
I just like this comment from quite a while back. This is 8:47. This is almost a half hour ago. Common mistake of new perfumers who do not want to smell their materials, who just dump them in. Not that you're a perfumer, but it's just kind of funny. A lot of people, they're very eager and enthusiastic, but they don't take the time to learn and to hone their skill, and they just want to share whatever creation they have, even if it's not fully realized. It's the story and the bane of so many independent perfumers who do that. for every one independent perfumer, there's probably 5 that are doing that. And it also it can be tough because the US and Canada are not nearly as regulated. So people can get away with releasing things and selling them to the public that may be a bit suspicious. And
Actually, in Canada, it's very tricky. Canada, there's huge regulation when it comes to perfumes. That's why a lot of brands don't ship to Canada because they are not allowed. Canada has really, really large, really big regulations for perfumes. We're not allowed to ship perfumes within Canada. That's it's just a fact. If I want to ship a bottle of perfume to anywhere via post service, if I tell them that it's perfume, they will reject. They will not. That's one of the things. But even importing perfumes, it's always so tricky. I know a lot of Canadians that have posted mailboxes in border cities with Canada, and they just ship things to the States, pick up there because a lot of companies, a lot of brands don't ship to Canada because of the regulations that Canada has, which is too much. It's too much. England, like nowhere from no company from England ships to Canada, and it doesn't make sense because we're part of Commonwealth too.
Right.
Just like, why?
GMG says, I agree with you, JJ. There's probably a romanticized aura surrounding vintage, but current reformulation is the only way to compare for us. Can't help but feed and strengthen that belief, depending upon the reformulations. And let's be real, for every reformulation that's been done very well, like with Guerlain and and maybe Chanel, Hermes, some other houses. The fragrances that haven't been given the same kind of love and care, and there's not really the money invested in keeping them retained with the same integrity, of course, yeah. And hey, with some of those, thankfully, a lot of those are not terribly expensive even to get in a vintage, so it isn't as much of a gamble. So yeah, it's true. And I've done a number of videos where I've done the comparisons, and I'm like, yeah, you should go with the vintage. Just hopefully you get one that's still fresh enough. Yeah, and definitely colognes with a lot of citrus. That's why I would never get like an eau de cologne de co. That's ridiculous. Like that would not be good. Those that are very heavy, you would want to buy a bottle that's more than 10 years old. They really turn.
That comment that Darren says right below at JJ, what's even worse is when you purchase a vintage perfume that has been refilled with something else.
That has happened to me as well, yes. And I can't help but to wonder if some vintage enthusiasts are like, this smells fantastic.
The emperor wears no clothes.
There are people who do that, especially with very vintage fragrances. They'll have a pristine empty bottle and they'll fill it with something else. Yeah.
Danny Engtil says she lives in Canada and never had problem in order from. I also never had problems. I order a lot from Europe and a lot from United States too, but not from specific shops in the States. Well, Perfume, oh my God, what's that? Lucky Scent.
Yeah.
Not probably pay taxes and stuff, but we have high, parameters when it comes to what's allowed and what's not. I think higher than the United States. I'm pretty sure about that.
Rachel, I'm so sorry that I missed you, and you've been here for almost a half hour. Great to have you on. I'm happy that you can catch a bit of the show as well. Sean H says he has a bottle of Xerius, Givenchy Xerius from the 80s that smells perfect as far as I can tell, and a couple of Cosmere Polo Greens that are in good shape. It depends on the fragrance, too. Some fragrances just... They age well. It really depends on variables, like what is in the composition that allows it to age okay. Yeah. I mean, there could be some components in that fragrance that preserve the lighter molecular weight materials. It's fascinating stuff. I do find that certain fragrances age better than others, for sure. Catching up a little bit more here.
There was some interesting comments too about the collective taste of consumers.
Yeah.
People. I'm sure you'll get there.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely don't have any regrets about exploring vintage. It's just it doesn't change the fact that it can sometimes be really upsetting when you buy something and it isn't what you expect it to be. It can.
I'm actually now waiting for a vintage bottle of Liu extract. So I'm very, very excited for that. It's but I'm only getting it because it's a sealed bottle of the extract. And
so it cut out, either my audio cut out or it cut out entirely. What is it that what is the bottle?
Liu.
Liu Galant Liu. Yes.
The extract in the black bottle.
Ooh, yeah, the one that Louis was based on, the octagonal bottle. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I would love. Oh wow, that would be a treasure. Hopefully, it's well preserved. Okay, thank you very much, Marcus. I'm sure you've already pieced out, but thanks for tuning in. And then Danny, now I'm at Danny's comment. I reconnect with an ex-girlfriend after 30 years and made her smell at blind eau sauvage and a smile on her face, and she said, "It's us, baby." Aww. That's the power of the scent right there.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And then Sean H says, I have a Jean Patou Voyageur where all the stupid aquatic notes are dead and it's literally just buttery sandalwood. I guess in a way, if you didn't really want those stupid aquatic notes, it works out well in the end. I mean, I do have some things like that where it's like, it's kind of a shame that the top notes aren't there, but what an incredible dry down.
But I don't miss it. Didn't need it.
In that case, yeah, he didn't need those top notes. Okay, and almost like I think this is a side conversation. There's plenty of those that happen during live streams, so I think that's out of context. So Sean H says, I've never smelled a modern oak moss replacement accord that even comes close. Well, But the thing is some of these accords or replacements are proprietary too. It isn't just one thing. I mean, of course, Evernol on its own doesn't replace oak moss. Orsinol, which is another one, it's a bit more expensive. That is combined with Evernol. That on its own wouldn't smell like oak moss. But it is about trickery. It's about a little bit of ingenuity on the part of perfumers. And we don't know, the exact formulas necessarily to be able to build an oak moss accord. Oak moss replacement accords, I mean, I don't know, from Perfumer's Apprentice, that's for folks who are learning how to make perfume dabble with, I suppose, if they don't contain any oak moss. But yeah, I mean, the debate still stands. It's a hot topic, and people get heated over it for sure. Also, the collective taste of consumers has changed over the past 100 years. The casual fragrance wearer doesn't want tons of oak moss in their perfume. And that's a good point too. Like in modern perfume, and this is a decision by people who produce the fragrances. They may decide that they want to scale back some of that oak moss accord because it may not appeal as much to modern tastes. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm crazy about that if they're taking like a fragrance that has a lot of history and heritage and doing that, but certainly for like newer releases, that makes sense.
I think, you mentioned Derek, the Scented Devil. He is a human encyclopedia of fragrance history and cultural context of fragrance. And to hear him talk about how collective tastes were reflected throughout history, what they tell us about ourselves and the people before us, and such is really fascinating to listen to and watch him talk in his weird electrical room. I'm not sure where he is when he's streaming.
Where he's at work, yeah. I actually...
That's his house somewhere?
No, he's at work, but I love the backdrop. The backdrop kind of adds to the whole experience.
So unexpected. What did you catch the Victoria? What is Victoria's Secret comment about materials don't matter? I'm not sure. So when you were saying that, I just want to make sure that was clear.
Yeah,
I guess we were talking about JJ. You were talking about the in big houses where the materials don't matter, because what you're doing is you're just making something mass appealing to market and sell, and it's not the soul of the materials. It's what's the least expensive and can macerate the fastest and get it out the door.
Right.
That's what you were saying about materials not mattering.
Well, I do see what she says here. I did not think it would be possible to bring up the oak moss. It will never be. It always ends up muscling its way into every conversation. and it's such a divisive topic too. And people are adamant that it's like, that was the death of perfumery and that's all she wrote. That's it. No good perfumery these days. And I don't know. I mean, that's a bit reductive. Like, I still am of the belief that it is possible to create an accord that, let's stop. We need to chill out on wishing that things were the way they used to be at another time, and it's just, there's some things that we just have no control over.
We don't, and so what? And also, make room for other things.
Make room for other ideas too.
Yeah. Make room for other people and other concepts.
And innovation.
We don't have to. I'm going to go off on I'm going to open that Pandora's box, and we don't want to do that.
Backstage, we'll have a backstage conversation.
We're talking about quality of materials. I mentioned earlier the Mathilde Laurent. She had this concept of creating a perfume that was an ode to I don't remember the exact century, but I think it was early 1900s, and we're using only synthetic ingredients. So, and that was the number 11 from Les Heures de Parfum, and it's such an incredible perfume, such an incredible perfume, and there's no natural ingredient at all. It's 100% synthetic. She needed it to be 100% synthetic because she wanted to create a perfume that showcases how good synthetics can be if when well used. And it's just it's a very interesting perfume. I have to talk about it at one point because there's nothing like it. I never smelled a perfume like it, and it's it smells natural. You would never say that it's 100% synthetic. And that brings another question: how many of us can actually detect the difference of natural versus synthetic? Precisely.
That's a really good question.
How many of us can actually detect natural versus synthetic oak moss in the perfume?
Oh.
This is a very good point, because there are certainly perfumers who can. They should.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, some not always universally, because there are some that are just so very well done or so realistically. But I certainly know perfumers who can, and I think this also gets back to the point about, the death of perfumery and everything that was good about perfumery is now over. But I wonder how much we really just collect, as the collective consumer, how much do we really know about what we're wearing anyway?
We tend to buy a lot of the advertising. We tend to
a
lot of advertising. Oh, this brand has fantastic perfumes that are $1,000 a bottle for 75 ml. Oh, they must use the best ingredients. Like, how do we know?
How do we know that? Yeah.
How do we actually know that they are actually using the best of the best? We don't.
And do you know, you only get you can only scratch the surface when you have smelled a lot of raw materials in isolation, and even that gets kind of tricky. Because I ask anyone who does have an infatuation with any given material to really spend time with them in isolation.
Yes, and you may develop a very different point of view.
And I always have to remind myself that people don't realize that I have, because I'm not actively a perfumer. I have perfumer experience, but that's been put on hiatus. I have the materials. I've actually been considering doing a series of videos if I ever have enough time. Don't have enough time to pump out content, but to do these videos of me sharing the materials that I have and what I've observed about them and what I've studied and what notes that I've taken. And because that's how I'm able to, to be analytical and also just feel. I can be analytical with a perfume, and then I can switch gears, get right-brained, and then feel it as well.
Yes. And that's something that What is Victoria's Secret was kind of getting at, about how important it is for perfumers especially, but really for anyone, any enthusiast or collector, the importance of knowing your materials and spending really, it's tedious.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
It's not fun, but if you're going to spend thousands of dollars collecting fragrances, you might as well just buy a few samples of raw materials, because they're not that expensive. It really isn't that. I'm not saying get things like Carnation Absolute or Narcissus Absolute. Those are pretty expensive, but you can get a small amount of oak moss and dilute it, pre-diluted. You can get certain materials and you can use them for reference so that you understand this is what they mean by a tarragon note. They aren't full of BS. They really, I know, I'm familiar with the herb, the herbal oil. I'm familiar what tarragon really smells like, what marjoram really smells, herbs, spices. I know of plenty of people who write full-fledged reviews and they're like, I've never smelled this in real life, but I'm fairly certain that's what I'm detecting in this fragrance. And it would be things like cloves, were they living under a rock? I was like studying my grandmother's spice cabinet when I was a kid. Like,
Yeah.
But that's all it takes. You could go to like a Whole Foods or like a cheaper supermarket.
Just open your pantry.
Open your pantry. Smell cardamom and smell cloves and get really familiar with the spices and the herbs. Oh, you want to know about frankincense? With frankincense, you need to experience a little bit of the essential oil and the tears and the olibanum to get the full picture. So I kind of feel like that would be like the progression for somebody who's like a fanatical perfume enthusiast. Like, now I want to know, like, what do these things smell like?
And you know what? This is awesome because my creative partner on the tower, the fragtastic Mr. Fox, Chris Fox, is full on board with this, exactly what you're describing. He's incredibly curious and smells everything, like including his dish soap, is just extremely interested in what things smell like. And then, dabbling a bit here and there with materials. Sometimes I send him a little bit of something and he's like, oh, what, tries to figure out what it is maybe, or, and so it's, he's very much in favor of that. Also kind of taking that extra step, not with the expectation, not, for the everyday person, not with the expectation that you're going to buy these fragrance oils off of Amazon and make a masterpiece, or that you're going to buy any raw materials from anywhere and make a masterpiece just off the cuff. But for to gain a greater respect and a greater, a deeper knowledge of what the heck it is you're actually even smelling.
Yeah. Reference materials. Sure. Sebastian.
Tripler made a comment that people need to cook with herbs more, JJ. 100% endorse that. But that's something that's very reflective of cultures and different cultures.
Yeah.
My husband is an example. He grew up in a community in a province that they simply don't use spices. All the spices they use is allspice, which I think it's related to oregano. And that's pretty much the most they would use. It's salt, pepper, very basic, kind of diet, and not many flavors at all. While me, in the opposite, being from Brazil and being exposed to a lot of different things, we have very different perceptions, and it's a very interesting thing how even spices, it's a very cultural thing.
Yeah.
Margie has the $1 million question. Does Paco Rabanne Pour en modern form smell as good as the vintage because the vintage is amazing? There are going to be examples where I say the composition has been affected in a way that has been affected because it is a lot more soapy and aldehydic than it ever was before. It doesn't smell bad. It's still wearable. It's still nice, but I am more partial to older versions of it. But yet again, getting back to our conversation earlier, just tread carefully when getting a bottle. Make sure to buy from a reliable seller who kind of knows, that they're selling things that are not completely turned. And it seems like other people kind of helped out as well. Sean H says it's still good, but a lot less mossy. The modern is much brighter and soapy without any sort of musk. It's a lot less musky. It was known for having that really musky base in the dry down for sure. And I wear the modern Paco and it's just fine. I think vintage is overrated. Oof. Uh-oh.
On that note, unfortunately, I have to say I have to go.
I was hoping you could stay with us backstage for a little while because I was going to wrap things up in a bit.
Well, how much longer? Because I have some plans, but
well, what we could do is we could wrap things up, but we'll just, I think I'm pretty much caught up with the comments. Yep. Darren mentions the 0.1 oak moss is still quite a bit. All right, so we'll start with the theme music here. And, Emily, do you want to share the Etsy website for your stuff?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right, let me see if I can.
Pull pull that up right here.
Yeah. I think that I might have to do it though. For some reason, like guests can't.
I can put it in the chat.
Oh, do you think that? Yeah, I thought for some reason only like the host can.
No, I have to do it from my phone. It's like I can't participate in the chat from here.
I think I found it. I can do it. I already have it right here.
Oh, okay.
And
I can put it in the private chat.
All right. So, folks, if you want to check out Emily's work, she does have samples. We were talking all about how important it is to sample. Check out her stuff. This is her Etsy site. And once again, you should subscribe to Sebastian. Excellent videos. You know, if I'm giving it a recommendation, it's got to be good. He has a great channel. Please, I do recommend subscribing to him. Exquisite taste, and he definitely is a great storyteller. Please check that out. And then, all right, then we go to this, which means we're closing out for the evening. So, a little bit. Here we go. See, I need to have like a production assistant for this. It was a wonderful conversation. Next week, we are going to have two people from the Les Odorants podcast, Fliss Sniffs Stuff, and James Houdini SOTD. He has hundreds of reviews online. And somebody had referred to him as acerbic, yet fair. Excellent sense of humor as well. So they're going to be joining me next week. And May 2nd, still open, holding out for somebody to verify. But I don't want to give away who's yet to verify, but May 2nd is to be announced. May 9th, we have Marie-Pierre Blanchette of Niscale. Just picked up Pistol. It is an exquisite fragrance. She will be with Pep, the Sentinel. And the 16th, it will be Pia Long, the perfumer Pia Long. May 23rd, yeah, wonderful, right? Roberto Dario and Diane of St. Clair will be with us on May 23rd. And for the finale, May 30th, finale for the season at least, Mark Robes 08, Margie Noir. And then we're on summer recess until September 19th. And June 27th, Darius, a.k.a. Persules, will be with me. That's June 27th for an Effluvium special edition.
All-star cast.
All righty. Yeah, I guess so. I'm pretty impressed with that. How did I manage that?
I don't know.
Good to see you, my friend. Love the collaboration between you and Emily. And good to see everybody else in the chat. Thank you so much for tuning in here. Savor the
everybody.
Herbs. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good night or day. Bye-bye.